to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. So as you can see, this is another reading vlog. I fully intended on this one being another weekly reading vlog like last week, but as you can see, I am already feeling this endeavor. I was honestly so busy this week and I had so many things to do, and I was a bit tired and I wasn't in the mood to read, and I think that's okay. Like, I feel like if I don't want to read, I just won't read, because reading for me is like pleasurable. It's something I can do to relax. It's a hobby, and I don't want to do it when I don't feel like it, otherwise it feels like a chore. So because of that, I didn't feel like reading, so I didn't read. But it's the weekend and I'm feeling festive. I'm feeling in the mood to read something, to learn something. And because of that, I'm going to be reading those two books right here. So the first one I'm going to be reading today is 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act. It's about Canadian Indigenous people. This book was recommended by Books and Lala. I don't remember what she said about this book, just that it was really good and that she recommended it to everyone who cared about Indigenous rights. And I'm that person. So I obviously want to learn more about Indigenous rights in Canada. And I also want to read more from Indigenous authors. So I think that's my first step in this genre. And the second book I'm going to be reading is The Whole Brain Child. So this is, I'm doing a PhD in psychology. And this book is about like how to raise a child well, I guess, like evidence-based wise. I am not sure, like, I thought it was gonna be bigger and it's pretty short, so I'm kind of scared, like, what are you gonna tell me in so few pages? But I'm still intrigued. So yeah, like, I don't know much about any of these books like usual, because I don't know anything about the books I read, but I am in the mood to discover what they're about. So follow me as I read them. So I finished 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act this morning, and overall it was a great read. I was very interested. I'll give you like 4.5 stars, like 4 to 4.5 stars. Like, I enjoyed it. And it's really hard for me to review books because I just don't know why I like or don't like books. I just know I like them and that's enough for me. But if I'm gonna make a channel about like talking about books, I feel like I should practice my reviewing skills. So that's what I'm gonna be doing today. So forgive me for this lackluster review, and just hopefully I hope you understand what this book's about and why you would enjoy it, because I have a hard time thinking that there's someone out there who won't enjoy this book because it's very accessible. So to start with, I just have to describe to you what the Indian Act is. It's I'm actually gonna read the author's definition because I find that it's pretty clear. I'll post a quote on the screen. But the Indian Act is a federal legislation that regulates Indians and reserves and sets out certain federal government powers and responsibility towards First Nations and their reserve lands. It was passed in 1876 and was administered by the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada Department. So I'm not sure if it was clear, but there's gonna be a quote, so it's clearer. But basically, it was an act that just sought to control how and where Indigenous people live. They're referred to as Indian in the act in the first part of the book too, just to like stay consistent with the terminology used then. But the author explains that right now people prefer the term Indigenous people, or I think Aboriginal people too. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, so it's like I'm not like, I think he preferred Indigenous people, and I'm gonna go with that because that's what I've been hearing most from activists. But yeah, so overall the book I see was a 4 to 4.5 stars, because I think in terms of the information provided about the act and what it meant for Indigenous people, that it was a 5 stars. Like, the information was very interesting, but in terms of the writing of the book, I found it really dry and not personable. Like, it was hard to, like, when I read it, it was just like a series of facts, which it's okay, and some people enjoy this kind of format, but for me, I prefer when there's like some of the author's personality into the book too. And like, I didn't learn much about Bob Joseph in this book, so I was like, I would like to have his own interpretation and like his own feelings about this act, instead of just being like facts, facts, facts. But I still enjoyed the book regardless. So yeah, I think a good reason I'm gonna give it 4 stars, because it's closer to a 4 star than a 5 stars for me, but it's still really good. And I highlighted some parts of the book, like, because I didn't want to forget anything. Like, I know there's annotating girlies out there, and that's not who I am. I cannot annotate because I'm too bored. Like, I'm too lazy for it. But I like highlighting the lines that either meant a lot to me or that I learned something. And I think honestly the best way to summarize this book or to introduce this book is with a quote by the Deputy Superintendent of the Indian Affairs in 1910, Mr. Duncan Campbell Scott, who said, it is readily acknowledged that Indian children lose their natural resistance to illness by arbitrating so closely in their residential schools, and that they die at much higher rate than in their villages. But this alone does not justify a change in the policy of the department, which is geared towards a final solution of our Indian problem. So it really speaks to how indigenous people were not seen as equal to you, honestly, to you white person, and it's really sad because sometimes you can try to explain the Indian Act through like, oh, they were trying to do their best, they were trying to do what they thought was helping the indigenous people, but I think that's an argument that's very disingenuous and not true because they knew that what they were doing was hurting people and didn't care. So I have no sympathy or no understanding of this act instead of it just being cruel. Like the author, I think even I mean, they never tried to give a morality to the act per se, but it's pretty clear that the act had no redeeming quality to me, anyways. And I just I want to talk to my fellow Canadians who deny the unjust treatment of Indigenous people because I'm just like, what universe are you living in? Like, I want to shake them and be like, just read this book. There's no way that the Indian Act was anything but a racist declarement. This is a racist legislation. Like, I'm actually a bit frustrated because I do see sometimes online, like in the debates about Indigenous people's rights, like people be like, "Oh, well, we have apologized, so that's enough." But apologies without actions mean nothing, and I guess overall, I just feel like there's a big unfairness about the treatment of Indigenous people in Canada right now, and that this book like shine light into history, but that we should, as Canadian people, make the next steps to change the future for Indigenous people. So overall, good book. I don't know if this makes sense because it's mostly me being like, oh, just don't be racist, and apparently that's a hard lesson. But anyway, that's it's time for me to read my second book, which is The Whole Brainchild by Dr. Daniel J. Siegel and Dr. Tina Payne Bryson. I, as I mentioned previously, this is a psychological book. I don't know if it's a textbook like or if it's more like personable, but it's meant to help you nurture your child's developing mind. So I'm excited to see more about that. I don't have a child, and it's not like my future anytime soon, but I do work with children, so I would like to understand what are the best practice to raise children. So I'm like halfway through the book, and so far I'm not really enjoying it. I find that if you've never had a class in like psychology, neuroscience, or behavioral neuroscience, you might enjoy this book and learn a lot from it. But because I've had these courses along with like actual clinical experience with children and supervisors who were like pretty knowledgeable about how to raise and nurture children, most of the like advice I've been reading from this book I've already heard before, so I'm not learning much from it. And I like this book is only 150 pages long, and it still reads like a super long. I find that just having a list of the interventions will be much more faster and effective than having to read through like this entire book. I don't really care for like some of the examples that they provide. Like, I'm not even sure what the example is supposed to say. Like, for example, they were talking about how to differentiate tantrum that children have if it's emotional or like more logical tantrum. And they're basically saying like if it's a logical tantrum, then in the child like basically trying to manipulate you to get what they want with the tantrum, you should like ignore them and reestablish boundaries. But if it's an emotional tantrum and that the child is just overwhelmed, then in that case you should like connect to them emotionally before redirecting their overwhelmness towards like a more logical reason and cause. And I agree with that, but I think they didn't explain how you can differentiate between both type of tantrums. Like, how do I know my child is throwing like an emotional versus logical tantrum? And I find that it's like sometimes they give examples to explain the thing that they're introducing, and I don't find that the example clarify what they're introducing for me. So overall, like, I kind of want to DNF it, but I don't want to at the same time because I only have like 75 pages left to read, so I can do that obviously. But like, what's the point of reading a book if you're not enjoying yourself? I don't know. I'll give it another like, unless I'm gonna finish it. I'm gonna finish it and probably give it 3 stars. But I can definitely see why someone would give it 5 stars because if I had never had any experience with child psychology, I think I would have been learning a lot from this book. So if you hear some sound in the background, excuse me. It's just that it's really hot in my apartment, so I had to open the window. But anyway, I'm a bit more advanced in this book, and Not only am I not enjoying it anymore, I just disagree with it. Like, one of the techniques they're teaching the parents is to encourage them to tell, like, basically when a child goes through something that was scary for them, or like I guess traumatic, for lack of a better word, the authors are encouraging the parents to encourage the child to talk about their experience through a story. And like one of the examples they give of a technique is like a DVD player that the child can pause the story when they want, fast forward aspect of the story, and that I agree with. But then in the example they give, there's like this coercion. Like there's no other word I can use. Basically, the coercion forcing the child to talk about a memory that they find traumatic, just so that they can learn to move on from that experience, which I get and it seems sound. But I recently read a book on trauma and how you don't want to force trauma victim to talk about their story, because when they talk about the story, they're basically re-experiencing the trauma with the emotional baggage too. So I'm like, why would we not follow the same advice for children? And it's just like the book is not even acknowledging that we oftentimes give the opposite advice in the trauma literature. So I'm just like, how can I integrate, I guess? I'm saying integrate because that's a word they love to use in the book. But how can I integrate both the advice as to how to go through like a traumatic experience with a child and how to navigate them through moving on, versus the trauma literature who tells us to do the opposite? Like, which one should I listen to? And because this book doesn't really provide evidence, like with sources and studies, I'm more willing to listen to the previous trauma related book I read. But yeah, like I don't know. I'm not feeling this advice. Okay, so another criticism is I hate it when authors create new terms to describe something that already existed. Like one example I can give is like the term grit to just describe conscientiousness. Like this term already existed. Like why are you inventing a concept that already exists? And I feel like it's only to capitalize and to market themselves as different. And the author from this book did the same thing. They created the term like mindsight, which is basically insight and empathy together, so understanding yourself and understanding others. But that's basically theory of mind. Like that's generally just that. So you're just developing the child theory of mind. And I'm like, why do you need a new term to describe something we already have coined a term for in psychology? Like, I hate when authors do that. Like, I'm not gonna use your word. There's already a word for it. So yeah, honestly, I'm not really enjoying this book. I really feel like DNFing it, but I'm already at page 121, and there's only like 28 pages left. So like I should finish the book, but oh my god, I'm not enjoying myself. Okay, so I finally finished the book, and when I say finally, I mean it, because every page felt like an hour that I've been reading them. They were not enjoyable at all. I was thinking of giving the book 3 stars because I think that overall the information provided is interesting and could be helpful for parents. But for my enjoyment, it's a 2 star because I did not like this book. Honestly, it could be a 1 star, but I remember the books I gave 1 stars to, and this book did not anger me as much. But anyway, it's a 2 star read. Like the information was interesting, but the way it was written, I don't know what about it I didn't like, but I just didn't like it. Like there were examples, it was personable and everything, but I just didn't care for the people. I don't know. It wasn't a fun read, and yeah, so I'm really glad I'm done with it. Did I learn something new? Maybe, but I cannot tell you right now. So yeah, like I recommend this book though. To all parents, I do recommend the book. I'm just not recommending it to like child psychologists or things like that because I don't think you're gonna learn much from it. But yeah, thank you for watching this short weekend vlog. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you're interested in seeing more books related video, please subscribe because I post one new one every Sunday. And that's pretty much it. Thank you. Bye.